from beautiful Phoenix, Arizona. It is the Neglected News Report. I'm your co-host, Scott Mitchell, along with my brother, Kevin.
Welcome.
And all I can say, folks, is we're back. Sorry for the long period between shows, but life has just gotten busy. I mean, in our family, we have all the birthdays and holidays and everything. I mean, everyone's got the holidays, Mother's Day and Father's Day, but we got so many birthdays in April and May, plus Kevin's two youngest kids graduated from college, and we had to go to that. And it's not ending for me.
Mother's Day.
Yeah, Mother's Day, Mom's birthday, my birthday at the end of April. Mom's was 2 weeks ago. And I've got a wedding anniversary party to go to next Saturday for some friends of mine who are celebrating their 25th and renewing their vows and everything. And it's just and then Father's Day, and it's like, and your one grandkid had his birthday too.
Well, it's heating up here in Phoenix, both literally and figuratively. It's going to be about 104, 105 today. And
I finally, for the first time, I'm so proud of this. I'm not having a large yield out of my garden this year, but for the first time, I actually had something from the pepper family go to maturity without getting the blossom end rot. I had two yellow banana peppers that I ate, and they were very good. And I just plucked off two what they call Baker's Hot peppers. They're like, one's like 6 inches long, one's like 8 inches long, and I waited till they turn red like they're supposed to. It's kind of funny. They go from a green to like a brownish brick red, and then they turn red. Now I've got some what they call salsa chili peppers that are in the process of turning now too. So I'm getting a little bit better with those.
So that was the literally hot, the 105 degrees, and figuratively we had the protest here in Phoenix last night.
Yes, we did.
How would you describe it? Anti-Islam or anti-Islam?
They call it the free speech thing. Free speech is an element of it, but based on the pictures I saw in the coverage, there are a lot of yahoos out there. Yeah,
I was going to go on, and had I gone, I would have been armed, but I would have been concealed.
There were some who carried open just to show force.
This one guy had body armor on with, he had 4, 5, 6 30-round clips, on his vest, and, carrying his AR-15, and,
you know what? Those people are yahoos. One guy I saw pictures of was wearing full camo. Another guy, a number of people were wearing F Islam shirts. There was another guy he was in full gear, and he was wearing a bandana across his face. From the nose down, it was a skull. And it's like, your battle is not with Islam, it's with militant Islam. And here's the other thing. Do you think if there were some militant Muslims there, that they would carry open?
No.
Heck no. Don't you guys get it? The element of surprise is on your side as well as it is on theirs.
What's the definition of the word ubiquitous?
It means it's there everywhere, but you don't notice it because it's all everywhere.
Exactly. And that's what I think your Second Amendment should be. It should be, there, but not brandished.
It's kind of like ubiquitous is kind of like surveillance cameras in Britain.
Yeah. Yeah, it's there, but nobody notices it. That's how it should be.
Exactly.
The guys that go into the supermarket with their sidearms and so forth. Okay, whatever. Can't you leave in your vehicle?
Yeah. Well, no, take it in there, but don't carry it open. And we actually have one chain of supermarkets in the Phoenix area that is actually standing up for being able to carry, and they allow it in their stores, and that's the Fry's supermarkets, which is part of the Kroger chain.
Well, you remember that big massacre in Kenya? It was at a grocery store, by the way. Do you remember a couple of years?
Shopping mall.
Shopping mall, yeah. Well,
same thing. People shopping, minding their own business.
Yeah, and all it would have taken was a couple, gun-carrying citizens.
That's the thing. You're making a statement by carrying it openly. And if you remember when we moved to Phoenix in 1972, there were more people that carried open. We used to see it all the time.
Yeah, it was kind of different.
We didn't see semi-automatics. We saw a lot of revolvers because it was still, in a lot of ways, Phoenix was still growing up. It was still kind of the Wild West.
But does it surprise you that nothing happened last night in Phoenix?
No, because Phoenix is... I'm going to say it, and a lot of you people in other cities are going to take offense. Phoenix is pretty civilized.
It's laid back.
It's laid back. It's not.
We don't have racial tension here. I go into mixed areas all the time. It's like South Phoenix is typically Hispanic and black.
Right.
But nobody.
I work with a guy who's Hispanic. Okay, his name is I won't mention his name. But he grew up. Most of his friends to this day are still black because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Where I work, I'm the minority with everyone I work with for the most part. It doesn't matter. We get along. We're people. It doesn't matter where you're from.
And growing up here, I was really naive, and I got into basic training, and all of a sudden I noticed that that the races segregated themselves. The blacks all hung out with the blacks, whites all hung out with the whites, and I was like, boy, that's different than I'm used to because nobody, it just was secondary growing up here. Just didn't.
I'm sure if we stayed back in New Jersey, it would have been different. Even though we grew up in a mixed neighborhood.
And you know what used to bother me? When that stupid Ev Meekum decided to make the MLK holiday a non-holiday in Arizona, we were given this bad rap for being a bunch of racists, which is the furthest from the truth.
You can thank Paul Tagliabue more than anyone else for that, taking the Super Bowl away from us the first time.
But we live a pretty serene existence here.
Yeah, it really is. And you would think as close as we are to the border that with what's going on down there with the drug cartels and everything, that would be, I guess Tucson might be different.
Tucson, they have an edge to them. You go down to Tucson and watch an ASU U of A football game. You'll probably get some urine thrown on you.
Yeah, I think they probably shipped in some guys, some Irish soccer hooligans.
They got nothing else going on down there except their sports team. So
it's pretty a boring city. Tucson, it's like you enter Tucson city limits, it's like a dark cloud descends.
They call it the Brown City because of that. It's just this. It's just a dusty backwater town. It's kind of like Baltimore in a way. It's a little big town. Well, you know what it reminds me of? El Paso, Texas. If you've ever been through there,
it reminds me of Albuquerque. I'm not a big
which is not one of my favorite cities either. Sorry to offend.
I've been there a few times. It's great if you grew up there, but I just found nothing fun in Albuquerque any more than I found in Tucson, and I've been to Albuquerque 3 or 4 times.
Heading east on
in the last 20
Interstate
years.
40, you all of a sudden you descend into this bowl, which is Albuquerque.
Because to get there from here, you go up I-17 north from Phoenix up to Tucson or Flagstaff, and then the rest of the way is going east on I-40 into Albuquerque,
Indian reservation,
and it's all flat. It's all flat. You're up at a high altitude, but it's all flat from that point on. But you reach a point where all of a sudden it's like, bam. It's like you go into a bowl and it's dark and dreary.
There's Albuquerque.
And it's like Phoenix down to Tucson, kind of the same thing. You're going downhill. As soon as you get past Fort Huachuca, I think is when it starts, right?
All right, what do we want to talk about?
Speaking about the border, you want to go back to what Anne Coulter said on the Fusion.
Yeah, she's getting a lot of guff.
With Jorge Ramos. She's pushing her new book, Adios America.
And she usually gets provocative when she's pushing her books. She usually likes to rattle people's cages.
And it's kind of funny. I'm reading her column today. I'm going to read part of it. Okay. And then there's some sections I'm going to leave alone. And this is from, this is from the 27th. It said May 30th. She wrote it on the 27th, published today in townhall.com. No, she published it on her website at 5 on the 27th. Anyway, I finally found a Mexican willing to do a job no American will do. I have an explosive book on the #1 issue in the country coming out next week. I've already written 10 New York Times bestsellers. I'd be on a postage stamp if I were a liberal, but can't get an interview on ABC, NBC, or CBS. Only Mexican-born Jorge Ramos would interview me on his Fusion network. Yay, Jorge! After a spellbinding interview, Ramos ended by asking this excellent question, which I had suggested myself for all authors, most of whom write very boring books harming the marketability of my own books. Here's the question. Is there anything in your book that isn't already generally known? My soon-to-be-released book, Adios America, The Left's Plan to Turn Our Country into a Third World Hellhole, is jam-packed with facts you didn't already know. Don't even think of using it as a coaster like those other books. And here's a few, but I'm only going to read a few that I thought were really pertinent, because the reason why I'm going to read the few that I'm going to read is, in the interview with Jorge Ramos, which was from Tuesday of this past week, the 27th, she said we have more to fear from illegal aliens coming across the border than we do from ISIS. And he was like taken aback. Jorge Ramos was taken aback. And she said, well, it's true. If you want to be killed by ISIS, go to Syria. If you're here in America, I can't tell you anything, because they're already here, basically. And he asked the question, I don't remember exactly how he worded it. I've seen the interview. I just don't recall how he worded it. And he said, basically, you're trying to tell me that there are some people who are genetically predisposed to violence and murder and corruption? She goes, no. I'm saying there are cultures that are. There are cultures that are sick. There are cultures that are corrupt. I even asked one of the guys I work with, who is Irish Mexican. I asked him, what do you think about that? He goes, I'll have to go along with you to a certain degree on that. He says, but, it's more like the government. I said, yeah, but the government's part of the people. Government comes from the people. And there's got to be a reason why it goes on, because the people allow it. Here's a few things I found that some of the points that she made. It says, America has already taken in 1/4 of Mexico's entire population. And Jorge Ramos's opinion, there's like 40 million people from Mexico.
But you know what? On the flip side, the positive is Western Union stock has gone up.
Yeah, from them wiring money to relatives in Mexico. Yeah. There's an upside, I guess, to everything. Okay, another thing is at least 15% of all births in Peru and Argentina are to girls between the ages of 10 and 15. In the U.S., only 2% of births are to girls that young, and those are mostly Hispanics, who are 7 times more likely to give birth at that age than white girls are.
And that's a cultural thing. You know what we call that in our country, in our culture? Pedophilia.
Yeah. Sex with girls as young as 12 years old is legal in 31 of the 32 states of Mexico. There you go. It's institutionalized. In all of Western Europe, the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and Israel combined, there have been 8 reported births to girls aged 10 or younger. 7 of the 8 were impregnated by immigrants. In some areas of America, law enforcement authorities have given up on prosecuting statutory rape cases against Mexican men in their 30s who impregnate 12 and 13-year-old girls after repeatedly encountering parents who view their little girls' pregnancies as a blessing. Since 2004, Mexicans have beheaded at least a half dozen people in the U.S. Mexican drug cartels, not ISIS, pioneer the practice of posting videotaped beheadings online. And the last one, an alleged ISIS beheading video making the rounds in 2014 was actually a Mexican beheading video from 2010. Now, if those are not signs of a society that's ill, that's what was the word I used earlier? That's ill, that's dysfunctional. No, that's not the word I was using. But anyway, those are not signs. But it's not only the people doing the things, it's the acceptance by everyone else. The fact that you have 31 of 34 states in Mexico that have legalized having sex with girls 10 to 12 years old, or whatever it is, 10 to 15, that tells me that you have something wrong with your society. And Anne Coulter goes on to say that right now, the U.S. is still the best society on the planet, and I'll agree to a certain point. We've done wrong, we have. But it ain't going to be like that very soon, because what happens with societies and politics that are toxic is the word I'm looking for, that are toxic. People want to get away from it, but once they do, they set up shop here and bring it and start it all over again. On a small scale, Californians come to Arizona.
But that's our fault, meaning our leaders' fault. They haven't expected these immigrants to assimilate. As a matter of fact, they are encouraged not to. Mm-hmm. And that is by design, sorry. That is to destabilize this country. The eradication of borders, the destabilization of the United States is part of the New World Order. Sorry. It's okay. Just, go ahead.
Those are some of the points she brought up. The first point she brought up, too. Some other things she brought up. Teddy Kennedy's 1965 Immigration Act was expressly designed to change the demographics of our country to be poorer and more inclined to vote Democratic.
How sick is that?
Exactly. It worked. Post-1970 immigrants vote 8-12 for the Democrats. Citing this dramatic shift in the Democrats' party's fortunes, Democratic consultant Patrick Reddy called the 1965 Immigration Act the Kennedy family's greatest gift to the Democratic Party.
That's even worse than cynical. It's evil.
It gets worse. Immigrants admitted before 1970 made more money, bought more houses, and were more educated than Americans. The post-Kennedy immigrants are astronomically less educated, poorer, and more likely to be on welfare than the native population. With no welfare state to support them, about a third of pre-1965 Act immigrants returned to the places they came from. British and Jewish immigrants were the least likely to go home. Less than 10% did. Although America is admitting more immigrants, they are coming from fewer countries than they did before 1970. On liberals' own terms, the country is becoming less diverse, but a lot poorer and a lot more Latin. And here's the insidious part about it. I did highlight a few more things. Here we go. I forgot these. Proponents of the 1965 immigration bill swore up and down that it would not alter this country's demographic mix. In fact, Kennedy's immigration policy has brought about the greatest demographic shift of any nation in world history. In 1980, Reagan won the biggest electoral landslide in history against an incumbent president, Jimmy Carter. Without the last 40 years of immigration, in 2012, Mitt Romney would have won a bigger landslide than Reagan did. He got more of the Reagan coalition than Reagan did. And the last thing, if Romney had won 71% of the Hispanic vote, he still would have lost. If he'd gotten just 4% or more of the white vote, he would have won.
It's almost, I don't even have words for it. Think about a political party who seeks to destroy people so that they will vote for them. And they got to keep them stupid, or else they'll figure out what's going on. Mm-hmm. They've got to be ill-educated. They got to be poor.
It's all about power and control.
It's just the ultimate in evil. It's not even cynical. It's evil.
Absolutely.
I mean, if anything, I want my fellow man. I want the water level to rise, man. I want people to be as good as they can, because the more people that are strong and educated and so forth, it just raises the water level for all of us.
It's like the old saying, the tide raises all ships.
Yeah. I would have, some years ago, I would have had to not believe that, because it's just too over the top. Mm-hmm. It's amazing that people would really do that. But it tells you what they think of their own constituents, is what it does, right?
Exactly. They don't have faith in their own constituents, so they have to create new ones who are going to vote for them.
And by virtue of
by blind faith
being their constituents, you necessarily have to be ill-educated and poor, mm-hmm. or else you won't take what they're offering you.
Unless you're from San Francisco, they're lost already.
Oh, well, that's that in Seattle and
Oregon,
Madison, Wisconsin, and areas of.
Now, there's hope for Wisconsin at least.
Well, not Madison.
No, well, I don't envy Scott Walker having to go to work every day in that city. I don't.
I kind of like the guy.
No, I don't envy him having to work there. I do like him. Don't get me wrong.
The beginning part of that Anne Coulter article always disturbs me when I hear this. And our own Senator McCain has said this before, that the illegal, he doesn't use illegal, that the immigrants do work that Americans won't do. That frosts my hide. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you why. We didn't get where we are, where we were in America by being lazy. We didn't always have migrant workers to pick, vegetables and fruit in the field. We did it by the sweat of our own brow.
I just had a thought.
What?
There might be some truth to that, but for the reason other than what you're stating. You know why Americans will not, why some immigrants will do jobs Americans won't do? Because there's a lot of areas in the country where there's plenty of work. It may be not the highest paying work, but it's available. You know why? Because the government set it up in such a way, local governments and federal government has set it up in such a way it's cheaper for people to collect unemployment and welfare. That's why they won't do those jobs.
Yeah, I mean, what did I saw something in Zero Hedge several months ago, and they actually calculated what the benefits, whether it be food stamps, the welfare, all that stuff added together. There are people out there making between $30,000 and $40,000 a year just doing nothing.
Man.
Nothing. Poor doesn't have a flat screen TV.
And you got people that work their butt off for that.
Poor doesn't have a car. Poor doesn't have a
cell phone,
a smartphone,
or an iPad.
Yeah, poor doesn't,
or an Xbox.
Poor doesn't wear a $200 pair of sneakers.
Nope.
On the lighter side,
there's a lighter side. Oh God!
I saw an interesting article today. I think it was in the. No, it was actually it was a link from Drudge Report that sex therapists in Silicon Valley.
I kind of skimmed over that a little bit.
The business is booming because there's so many 40-year-old virgins.
Oh my God!
Computer nerds. I thought that was, and when they explained it, it made sense. They said, first of all, it takes money. It takes money to be able to afford a sex therapist. And there's plenty of money in Silicon Valley.
Of course there is.
And on top of it, by virtue of being successful in Silicon Valley, you have to be sort of a nerd. And
my people.
You've been dealing in the digital world your whole life, and you can't really relate to real flesh and blood humans.
Yeah.
So the sex therapists they're booming.
I'm not nearly the nerd that a lot of those people are. I know people that are like that, though.
Well, you know why? Because you and I were caught in between two eras.
Yeah. We weren't raised with this stuff. We had to learn it.
Yeah, we had to learn it in our 20s.
Yeah.
We didn't have computers. The first time I ever sat in front of a computer, I was in junior college after I got home from the Army, and I was in my late 20s.
I know people that are in their 20s and 30s that are up on weeknights till 2 and 3 in the morning on social media. And it's like, that's not really what we had in mind when we said interact with people,
Yeah, have you heard about some of these nerds that actually have, they actually die from doing like marathon internet?
I skimmed over an article, I skimmed over 2 headlines on Drudge. Motorcyclist runs in the back of truck while texting while he's on his motorcycle. Then the next story said, continues to play game on the phone as he's waiting for paramedics to come. It's like, you can't make this stuff up, folks. You just can't.
No, and I'm as guilty as the next person when it comes to my smartphone. But I'm becoming a little bit more aware. I was in McDonald's a few weeks ago, and I literally looked around, and every person, not the majority of people, every person in that place was sitting with their head down, staring into their dumb phones. Their smartphones.
And I do that if I go to a McDonald's or something, because I usually, when I go there, it's usually when I go to Walmart to go food shopping or something, and it's in the morning, and I use it to read the news while I'm eating.
And I'll guarantee you, if I've got some driver in front of me that's doing, something bizarre like, stopping and starting, swerving, and that, you can guarantee they're texting.
And you know what? And I've said it once, I've said it again, folks. If you want to talk while you're driving, get a freaking Bluetooth earpiece or get a hands-free setup. They're not expensive, and there's no excuse for it. I'm tired of seeing people holding one hand on the steering wheel with one hand on the phone. It's not the same. There's a big difference between having the earpiece in your ear and having hands-free. I've got both. You need to have both hands on the wheel.
And of course I'm going to be accused of being sexist, but women are the worst.
Yes, they are.
Not only do they do their makeup in the car,
that's been going on for decades.
They're constantly on the phone, and it's like, it's dangerous.
When I get to work, I go in the elevator, and almost exclusively with women, they're walking into the elevator with their head down, looking at their phone. They walk from the back door, the employee entrance, to the elevator, which is about 50 feet, from the time. I mean, they're walking across the parking lot doing this. I mean, come on, really? You can't wait till you get to your desk? Oh, wait, you have to work. Darn. You know?
Well, I found this article very intriguing in, again, Zero Hedge. If you guys ever want to go to a really interesting website, it's zerohedge.com, and it's basically an economics. He gets real deep into economics. If that bores you, there's also a lot of interesting articles in there. He get about just world affairs and things. This article is entitled 10 Things We Had to Unlearn That Our Children Won't.
Now, when you say won't, does it mean they won't have to or they refuse to?
Probably I got the feeling is they refuse to because they're so brainwashed.
Based on what you were telling me earlier, that's what it sounds like.
And he starts out by saying this list could grow to 1,000 ideas, but I've kept it down to 10. In the future, I might update it and add some more. There are a lot of bad ideas that dominate the world we live in today, most of which are uncritically accepted as the norm and fully embraced by society. As a millennial myself, that's Tyler Durden is the author's name. I've noticed my peers seem to accept most of this as conventional wisdom, hook, line, and sinker. Here are some of the ideas I was propagandized with that I hope my children will never have to unlearn, meaning like he has. The first one is violence is normal. Presidential candidates today are fighting over who can kill better by using drones or boots on the ground. By constantly threatening the use of violence against other countries, statists have conditioned the population into thinking that killing tens of thousands of people is normal behavior instead of the immoral, dangerous provocation it is. Rather than being charged with murder, politicians and others that help support that behavior are often paid $250,000 or more a speech after they leave office and referred to as Mr. President or former chairman of the Federal Reserve. Video games, movies, television shows, and even toys all have a common theme: death and destruction. For example, there's nothing like teaching your child about policing in 2015 America via these Playmobil toys. Oh, it's a picture, sorry. They have cops in body armor with attack dogs and so forth. And he says, this isn't normal, this is psychotic. And he's right. If you watch any movies anymore, the violence is just incredible. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've been watching several different shows on Netflix, and every one of them is just violent. And
that's why, in a way, I kind of appreciate Daredevil.
Yeah, they keep it down. It's something your 12-year-old.
And Daredevil himself, with every fiber of his being, avoids killing.
Yeah, he doesn't kill anybody.
He beats the snot out of them sometimes, but they're bad guys. Come on.
If you get a chance, watch that show. It's
pretty good.
He's a superhero who's blind.
Yeah, season 1 was pretty awesome.
Yeah, and I'm waiting for season 2.
I'm just wondering what's going to happen with his Fisk's Wilson Fisk's girlfriend. She scares me.
Yeah. Okay, number 2 thing that he had to unlearn was political parties govern differently, and this is one that I only recently unlearned.
And I'm just now really unlearning it.
As a this could be me speaking right here. As a former Republican, I used to hate the Democrats. Now I see these two parties as just two wings on the same beast. I usually say it as two sides of the same coin. Those are my terms. Mm-hmm. It's true that they run with different themes and talking points, but in the end, they govern the same. They share the top donors, vote yes on the same wars, and never roll back a single thing the other does once in power. Bush picked Bernanke to run the Fed, and Obama renominated him. Republicans like Nixon ran on anti-war platform during the Vietnam era until Reagan-Bush took over in the 80s. Then the Democrats were anti-war in the 2000s until Obama took over in 2008. Clinton, Bush, Obama, looking back at the last 25 years, I don't see how anything has changed in the U.S. with regard to foreign policy spending or lying about U.S. economic data. The oligarchs have us all fooled. Political parties are nothing more than spectator sport for a dumbed-down public. And when I get into a conversation with somebody and they throw that Republican Democrat paradigm at me, I stop them straight in the tracks and I tell them, I'm not getting into that conversation with you because it's dumb, it's stupid. Mm-hmm. There isn't, you're talking like, you're an FDR Democrat, like, and I'm this, I don't know, fat cat Republican. These old these old stereotypes that don't exist.
In many ways, it has to be said, though, that I think Reagan was the last decent one. Things really started to change dramatically after him. Yeah. Do you agree about that?
Yeah.
You know?
Although
he was the last one that tried.
I've learned to really appreciate JFK, though.
So have I. Reagan's the last one that really at least tried.
Scott and I were raised Republicans, and we were told JFK bad. That's what we were told our whole life, you know.
But that goes to a lot of things, too. I was thinking about this when I was in the shower today. Growing up, there are a lot of things we were told to avoid because they're bad that I'm having to look at as I've gotten older, and I find what's so bad about it. Like a lot of music.
Janis Joplin used to scare me because Mom told me she was a witch.
Right. And it's like, there's a lot of bands I didn't listen to when I was younger because I was told they were bad. And singers, Joni Mitchell, and I only bring her up because there's been articles about her having that aneurysm lately. I didn't even know about it. But I mean, she's not that bad. What's wrong? She was a protest singer. She hardly sang a protest song. She did some.
Do you know I saw Janis Joplin interviewed by
Neil Young's not bad
by Dick Cavett in the late 1960s, and she came across to me as a very sweet person, actually. Mm-hmm. You know, she ended up getting in trouble with drugs and probably hanging around with the wrong people. But when she was being interviewed, you could see her spirit, her soul was really gentle. That's what I took from it, you know. And I was told my whole life that she was, you know, this drug, you know, crazed woman that.
Yeah,
you know.
I still don't get Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, but.
Okay, number three of things I had to unlearn: patriotism is a virtue. Why? It was an accident that I was born here. Am I grateful to be living in the U.S. surrounded by family and friends? Yes. All the same, I owe the U.S. government nothing. I'm a sovereign man. Ooh, that's dangerous to say these days. And shouldn't have to subscribe to any group or nation just because I happen to be born in a part of the world called North America. I love everyone in this world, and I'm not going to express loyalty for a specific region like a sports fan who loves his team only because it's in the same city he resides in. Governments are dangerous, and the U.S. is the most dangerous one at the moment. My love for the U.S. is no more than my love for the Bahamas or Europe.
Well,
yeah,
I have a hard time with that one, but here's the way I would look at it.
Because he sounds like a globalist there.
Patriotism not for your government as it now stands. Patriotism for the ideas the country was built on, yes. The institutions that made it great, yes.
He could have gotten more specific there.
It's like
he sounded like a globalist.
It's like Jonah Goldberg in his book Liberal fascism. I keep forgetting the name of that. He said that if you want to know the difference between a nationalist and a patriot, nationalists use terms like the homeland, the people, the workers, whereas patriots basically don't use catchphrases like that. No. They tend to talk about the institutions and ideas that made the country great and stand up for them instead.
No, I find the homeland creepy.
I do too. Since I first heard it.
It's just creepy. Okay, number 4. Now, I'm going to read this. I'm going to reflect on it afterwards and see if I agree with it or not. Illegal aliens are evil criminals who desire to collect welfare from taxpayers. For a long time, I couldn't stand these people, he says. Nevertheless, if I wasn't randomly born in Los Angeles and was instead born just 144 miles south in Tijuana, I would be doing the exact same thing the illegal aliens are doing. I would be attempting to better my life and my children's lives by migrating north. Humans moving to different regions is a natural event. The only unnatural thing is the imaginary lines we call borders. As far as the welfare, that's a symptom of the disease we call government. It's like me taking a tax deduction. While I don't support the income tax, I'm not stupid, and I'm not going to do everything I can to game the system and benefit myself. So his libertarianism is really coming out.
Yeah.
You know, there's libertarians on both the right and the left. And this is very leftist.
But like Anne Coulter said in that interview with Jorge Ramos, which I didn't mention, she said, we can export our ideas and our values to other countries without allowing them to come into the country. They don't have to come to the country to get those. We can export them. Whether they want them or not is up to them.
Isn't this war on terror supposed to be doing that?
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah. We're going to spread democracy?
That's the problem. You don't do nation building. I'm sorry. Nation building that's something we have to unlearn too, that we can do nation building.
All right, number 5. Taxes are justified at gunpoint. Taxes with the threat of jail or violence is wrong. I'm sorry, but I don't owe you or anybody else a portion of the fruits of my labor, especially not under the threat of violence. Simple and to the point, and I couldn't agree with him more.
Right. And now, don't get us wrong. We believe that you have to have taxes for necessary things. Unfortunately, the vast majority of the things that we're taxed for are not necessary.
Don't get me into the 16th Amendment.
Which one was that? Oh, the income tax?
The income tax.
Yeah, I know.
All that.
Aaron.
You want to know what all our income tax does? It doesn't build roads. It doesn't do anything. All it does is pays the interest on our debt to the Federal Reserve. That's all it does. To the foreign bankers. That's all. It's a big Ponzi scheme, and don't get me going there because we don't have enough time.
Watch Aaron Russo's. Is it Aaron Russo?
Yeah.
Watch his documentary. Just look it up.
There's several of them out there that go into the Federal Reserve. You need to understand how our monetary system works or doesn't work. It's just so corrupt. It's so evil. It's incredible.
For the last 100 years, it's been like that.
And it was done on purpose. It was done to take our liberties away from us.
Woodrow Wilson, once again.
And he
I hate that guy.
He rued the fact that he signed that into being too.
Only a few years later when he passed away.
War is good for the economy. I was told at a very young age, and even in high school, that war helped the economy boom. When you think about it, it makes no sense. Using production lines to create products that blow up into nothing is a tremendous waste of resources. Looking back after World War II, the U.S. cut spending by 50% and reduced the military from 12 million to 1.5 million. The evidence from the late 1940s and 50s is that the economy boomed when we had less war. That's the big lie. I
remember being told that as a kid.
That's the lie the devil tells.
Remember?
That's the lie he tells. And you know who benefits? The only people that benefit from war?
Bankers.
They're
usually the ones who are putting up money for both sides to go against each other.
The ones starting them.
Yep.
And if you think the President of the United States is pulling the strings, think again. There's bankers. Those are that's the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain. That's that. Oh, by the way, the Wizard of Oz. Did you see that thing I posted about the true meaning behind the Wizard of Oz?
I read a little bit of it.
Pretty interesting. The yellow brick road.
Yep.
That is the Fed. It's the unleashing of the Fed. But anyway, Number 7, terrorists hate our freedom and culture. Are there extremists? Absolutely. But the fact is, the U.S. has troops in so many countries and has a horrible track record of toppling democratically elected governments, supporting sociopaths and arming rebels who later become terrorists. It's no wonder, then, that these policies occasionally come home to roost. For 1 second, imagine that a nation bombed your neighbor and killed your son. What would your reaction be? These are the situations thousands across the world face on a consistent basis. What if Iran had troops in Mexico and Canada, ships off our coast, and drones over our airspace? Would we want a nuclear bomb for defense? George Washington was a terrorist in the eyes of Great Britain. If you want to know who's dishing out much of the tyranny and chaos in the Middle East, as an American, you don't have to look far from home. I have to agree with him on that. You know,
I do, but I also have to say that they don't like freedom, the terrorists.
Oh,
they're totalitarian ideologies.
Sure, but
by nature.
But we're not going in there to save the people from their tyrants. We're going in there for our own purposes.
Yep.
We're going in there so we have bases. We're going in there for their natural resources. We're going in there for our own selfish reasons.
Why do we still have? Ask yourself this, people. Why do we still have bases in Japan? Why do we still have bases?
And ask
everywhere?
Yourself this question: how come the heroin trade has increased tenfold since we went into Afghanistan? Figure that one out. You know what they grow in Afghanistan? Poppies. What do you make with poppies? Heroin.
Opium.
Doesn't take long to figure that one out.
Yep. All
right, number 8. The U.S. has a free market economy. I love this one because we haven't had a free market economy in so long. He says this is seriously stupid, but college professors and politicians repeat this mantra every day. In reality, the economy is so centrally planned that if the Fed alters one sentence in their statement, the Dow Jones could rally or fall by 200 points in an hour. Here's another fact. Nearly 50% of America's EBT program in Oklahoma went straight to the coffers of one company, Walmart. I didn't know that. Meanwhile, regulations in some industries have forced businesses to have an entire division dedicated just to compliance. Even worse, many of these regulations are pushed by the larger corporations in order to drown out the competition with bureaucracy they can't possibly afford. And this is in bold letters. There is no free market in the U.S., only crony capitalism, manipulation, and a centrally planned system manned by busybodies. That's called fascism. Mm-hmm. Plain and simple. When you've got business and government planning, what am I looking for? Business,
centralized.
Well, business and government.
Colluding.
Colluding.
There we go.
Colluding against the American people.
And before you say, it's not fascism, where's the military? Fascism doesn't necessarily have to have a military component. Read Jonah Goldberg's book, Liberal Fascism. Fascism will use whatever it has at hand to accomplish their ends. Whatever means, like, what does Rahm Emanuel always say? Never let a good crisis go to waste. That is the history of fascism. They go from one crisis to another. They always want to keep the populace on their feet.
And don't forget that Mussolini was a darling of the intelligentsia when he burst on the scene in the 1920s. They loved him because he was going to prove that a symbiotic relationship between business and government was necessary for a just society. And look what happened.
And when asked why when the intelligentsia was asked why they liked him, what was the phrase they always used? Because he kept the trains running on time.
Yeah, so did
basically.
Hitler. So did Hitler.
Yep.
Okay, number 9. U.S. troops are dying for my freedom. This is a tough one because you want to naturally love and respect anyone who does something for you, especially if it's to protect you from harm. The only reason I even bring this up is because many of the troops are honest, decent young men looking to serve their country or to be part of something greater than themselves. Nevertheless, these men and women are merely being used and abused in a Game of Thrones-esque battle for global wealth and power. They are often just collateral damage for large corporations looking to expand their businesses into territories and countries that without U.S. military intervention would likely be thrown out by the locals. I genuinely think the troops are willing to die for my freedom, but the corrupt American empire poses a much greater threat to my freedom than any outside enemy we are constantly taught to fear. Now, those are hard words. I would never have thought that I would be agreeing with the term the corrupt American empire. But it hasn't always been the corrupt American empire. It's just been slowly, by degrees, getting worse and worse and worse. After World War II, we had so much power that it was impossible to stop.
But the thing is that they died for our freedom and everything. And I've always had a hard time with that phrase when I look at the wars that have gone on in my lifetime. How is fighting a war in Southeast Asia protecting my freedom? How is fighting a war in the Middle East protecting my freedom? The last war, I believe, that protected our freedom was World War II. And
Vietnam War was started on a false flag incident, the Gulf of Tonkin. It's declassified now. It was a made-up thing. There was no attack on the I forgot the name of the ship.
Yeah, I don't remember.
So it's all built on a lie.
I mean, World War II. I mean, if we hadn't gotten involved in World War II, Nazism would have spread.
There are those who think that Pearl Harbor was a false flag, but
from what I've read, though, it was because the Japanese were pissed because we created an oil embargo.
Of course. Right. But what I'm saying is a false flag in the sense that it was manufactured. It could have could have been avoided. That's all I'm saying.
And that's the thing I never understood about it. Prior to Pearl Harbor, we were the number one supplier of oil to Japan. Yep. And they needed that to keep their war machine running and everything else running. And then all of a sudden, after how long had Roosevelt been in office at that time? About 9 years, 8 or 9 years. How come all of a sudden then he decides, well, we're going to cut off the oil supply?
We shut down their bank accounts. We shut down the money. We did.
And that's why they attacked the Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor as a response.
Yeah, they're pretty much pushed into a corner. But you don't. So you got to view history with an open mind, and not just from to the victors go the victors. What's the term?
Go the spoils.
Yeah, I know the spoils, but they write the history.
Yeah. The winners write the history books. But what I was going to say, the reason why they attacked Pearl Harbor is because they needed to get oil, and there was oil in the Philippines area, and the only thing standing in their way was the U.S. Pacific Fleet. That's why they had to attack Pearl Harbor the way they did.
And also, they used to get a lot of some of their was it steel from Indochina?
I'm not sure.
We were blocking that too. So anyway, that's why they were so cruel to the Chinese, because the Chinese were on our side at that time. Why
did Roosevelt all of a sudden just change his mind and start blockading or putting up embargoes?
Churchill had something to do with that, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, he probably.
But the point is,
World Bank said something to do with it too.
There's something other than what you think that guides world events. Mm-hmm. Trust me on this. Just trust me. Okay, number 10, and this has got to be my favorite. My vote matters.
Mm-hmm.
Remember in 2006 when the Democrats were going to get our fiscal house in order? Or was that in 2010 when the Republicans were going to do the same? I don't know, but your vote doesn't matter. The populace is easily manipulated and or asleep when it comes to matters of importance, so why bother? The vote counters and the media have already decided who's acceptable, and of course, at the end of those strings are the oligarchs who run the world. That's the unseen hand. See my okay. Edward Snowden sacrifices freedom to alert voters of high crimes in the U.S. government, and many Americans have no idea who he is. Meanwhile, most politicians want to triumph for treason. In summary, the good news is that because of the communications revolution we are in right now, I truly feel like there's a great awakening happen. We see it in the alternative media boom. Blogs like Liberty, Blitzkrieg, Zero Hedge, and others are currently challenging conventional wisdom with ferocity and success. We need to keep fighting. There's a lot of that I agree with. Some of it he goes a little bit overboard, I think, but it's something to definitely bite into, and because the world isn't quite like you've been told it is.
We could sit here and come up with more things to add to that easily.
Yeah, like my buddy always says, and I repeat this all the time: if voting was so important, they wouldn't let you do it.
Yeah. Well, the one thing that I have to unlearn, or a lot of people have to unlearn, is that the U.S. is a democracy. It's not a democracy. We vote democratically in a democratic manner, but we are not. Our government is not a democracy. It's a republic.
So you saw this latest statistic too, that the GDP dropped by 0.7% in the first quarter of this year.
That's pretty sizable, considering good growth level is considered about 4%.
But we were told after the end of first quarter that it had grown by like 3% or something, and they readjusted it. They do this. They do.
I don't recall ever seeing figures on unemployment and the economy having to be readjusted as often as I have during these last 6 years.
So
ever.
I was listening to this one pencil neck geek the other day. He was talking about the economy and how stable our labor market is. And I shook my head and I said, "What?
Really?
Well, yes, the unemployment rate is 5. Oh, okay, you're going to play that game with us, all right? 93 million people are out of the workforce, yet our workforce is stable. Because according to these geeks, those people don't exist. They're not even in the calculation. So you're taking a third of the population and saying, you get your checks, we'll send you your
They don't count the non-participation rate.
They don't count them. So you're given this false narrative that everything is hunky-dory when it's not. I mean, this is a carcass this economy is just a carcass that the carrion are flying around, getting ready to bite into. So yeah, there's some there's more economic data that we're being lied to about.
And then of course you get the cities that are raising the minimum wage, and more people are out of work. Look what's happening to Seattle?
Yeah, but my liberal friends post that it's great. It's going great for the economy up there.
I don't know how many articles I've read about that in the Seattle area, foodies are up in arms because all the good restaurants are closing because they can't afford to stay open because of the minimum wage being raised. It's just, I mean, we're talking about restaurants that have been around for decades in some cases.
Don't they understand basic economics? I mean, they don't call economics a dismal science for no reason. You can't get around it. It's mathematics.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just arbitrarily, set price controls. You can't do wage controls. You can't do that. It doesn't work. The markets are far more complicated.
Well, you know the old saying, figures don't lie, but liars figure.
Yeah. I mean, I had an economics professor many years ago when I went to Arizona State. He, at the end of a Friday, he asked us all, I want you guys to ponder this question over the weekend and come back with an answer when you can. And it was a simple question. It was a simple question, only, the question itself, but the answer was very difficult. He asked us, how many people does it take to make a car? He said, think about it over the weekend. So we came back on Monday, and everybody had their answers, ranged from 1 million to, several hundred. It didn't matter. And finally, we were all curious. Well, how many people does it take to make a car? And he says, I don't know. Neither does anybody. He said, that's called free markets.
Mm-hmm.
You need you got the guys who mine the ore to build the steel.
Yep.
You got the trains that carry the steel to the factory. It's impossible. And you know what? Planned economies don't know the answer either. They can't do it.
But you didn't build that.
So yeah, you can't beat that. You can't fake it.
Nope.
Hear another banker jump to his death?
No, you told me earlier, but that's the first I heard about it.
29-year-old banker in New York City jumped from the 24th floor, landed on a car that had 2 people in it, freaked them both out.
Oh yeah, that would do it.
And again, they just, when you read it in the media, they kind of just treat it like, okay, another banker, maybe they're just depressed. And they interviewed his father and said, yeah, he was under a lot of pressure, was probably drinking too much, and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, well, that makes 50 or 60 bankers in the last couple years that have jumped to their deaths, or shot themselves in the head with nail guns, 3 or 4 times. So.
Wouldn't the first one kill you?
That's what I'm saying. Sooner or later, you got to say, okay, are these people killing themselves, or is somebody else doing it? That's
kind of like saying someone's found at the bottom of the river with a bunch of weights around his neck, and it's called an accidental drowning.
Yeah, and the scientists, we got the scientists are ending up dead.
Mm-hmm.
This is rather disturbing. China is building sand castles. They call them sand castles in the South China Sea. What they're doing is they're dredging areas of the South China Sea and pouring tons and tons and tons of sand in them, and they're setting up artillery batteries on these man-made islands because of, I guess that it has to do with, I guess we're both saber-rattling over Taiwan. Scott?
Mm-hmm. Sorry.
So,
throwing a note.
That combined with what I found out this week.
So the China Sea, you said?
China Sea, yeah. This retired, was it retired or where he still might be? He must be retired, or else he wouldn't have been able to say this. NATO general came out and said that there will be war by this summer. He said he doesn't know if it's going to be nuclear or tactical or what, but and you're seeing all these flybys. our ships are being buzzed. This was really disturbing a few months ago.
Oh, by Russia?
The Russian, was it a bomber? I believe it was.
I think so.
And they have, they jammed all of our radar. They just flew right by us, totally they did it several times and just basically taunted us, and we had no defense for it. And yet we're saber rattling with them over Ukraine. We're getting into it with China over, the control of they're a part of the world.
I mean, do you think it'll ever get bad enough to where Obama's going to do something? Even if we're attacked by someone, do you think he'd do something?
I don't think it comes down to Obama.
Well, he's the one that would have to send the troops out, right?
Well, yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
But he takes his marching orders.
That's true, yeah.
I saw an interesting interview. This guy, I can't remember his name now. I'm going to watch more interviews. He interviewed Rockefeller.
J. Rockefeller.
And it was very, very, he was trying to get him to come clean about the New World Order and so forth.
Yeah, he's a one worlder, folks.
He wasn't biting into it. So
if he's anything like his predecessors in the family, they don't give in very easily. As a matter of fact, they're usually the ones forcing others to give in to their will.
Well, yeah, they got all their money. They just don't want you to be able to make any of your own.
Need I bring up the history of J.D. Rockefeller the First? He was I'll put it this way, he was a bastard. He was, I can't remember who his mentor was.
Oh, I remember.
But he ended up just turning on him. He just wanted to grab everything he had, so he could be the number one guy on the kid in the schoolyard.
Well,
he was ruthless as can be.
The building of the Federal Reserve was just designed to consolidate all the money and all the power in the world, and that's what they did.
Mm-hmm.
When they met at Jekyll Island.
Yeah.
Jekyll Island's an island off of Georgia, and all the powers that be, that include J.P. Morgan and Rockefeller and all those guys, they met there to design the Federal Reserve, and they didn't use their real names. They came up with fictitious names under the cloak of dark. Everything about the Federal Reserve.
There was a U.S. senator there,
yes,
even that facilitated it all.
Everything about. Do you know the story why the Federal Reserve came about? Was because of the Panic of 1907, which was started by J.P. Morgan. Mm-hmm. He gave us false information that one of the major banks in New York City was getting ready to fail, and people ran on the bank. And he said, to prevent another panic like 1907, we're going to come up with the Federal Reserve, which is basically just nothing but a central bank of the United States, which Andrew Jackson warned about and fought off, by the way.
Yeah, it was also fought about by the founding fathers. Alexander Hamilton wanted one. He tried twice, and George Washington. That was a big reason why there was falling out between Hamilton and Washington and Adams and Jefferson.
I heard the other day the real reason the Revolutionary War started. We're always told taxation without representation. Boston Tea Party, blah blah blah. No. What was happening was the British were going to basically have a centralized bank here in the United States. Mm-hmm. They were going to bring centralized banking to the United States, and of course our founding fathers saw what was happening and said, no, we're not going to be slaves. And that's really one of the major reasons.
Because pushing the taxation without representation narrative was something that people could understand better than.
Yes. Because people's eyes glaze over when you start talking banking and so forth. Mm-hmm. But when you can convince people that our banking system literally can hold you as a slave and get them to understand that, then their eyes, open up and say, wow, now I get it. When people used to say the bankers, I used to sit there and say, the bankers, what? But now I get it. It's like, yeah, they do enslave people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so. It's just insidious. It's terrible. But I'm not sure there's a lot we can do about it. Anyway, folks, one thing we can do about it is that we can do something about is we got to end the show. But what God willing, we'll be back here next Saturday. Now that we've we've weathered the worst of everything,
Yeah, we should, and unless something unforeseen happens.
Because Kevin, about a week or two ago, Kevin made the comment that we're neglecting the neglected news report.
Yeah.
Well, it's not neglected. I mean, when you got things you got to do, you can't get around them. I mean, it's just been one thing after another, folks. Anyway, we will see you next Saturday, though, and hopefully I'll have this up on YouTube.
We forgot to talk about Denny Hastert.
Well, that's something I think that's going to be around for a little while.
The pedophile.
Anyway, guys, I should have this up online on YouTube by the end of the day tomorrow. Anyway, have a good week.
Adios.